Ryan Moss, man, as you chug a Red Bull 3:30 in the morning in Hawaii. How's it going, buddy?
It's going great. Thanks for having me on, Brett.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It's been really cool to get to know you. I'm working at Any Question full time now, and brought you on as an expert in photography. And I've been the whole team has been loving your answers, man. In terms of just the way that you share your knowledge and your experiences, I think it's very unique, and it's been really impressive to get to know you.
Well, thank you. I think, just to touch on any questions, I really like the platform. It's it allows the experts per se to like have a conversation and
Hmm.
be a little bit more personal. There's a lot of other platforms out there. I'm not going to name them, but um, I have been a part of those, like not answering, but just like kind of as a viewer. And
Hmm.
you kind of walk away with the very like tip of the iceberg, like as
Right,
basic as it gets. And I just feel like you don't really learn too much. And
right,
a lot of being a expert in having longevity in this career, especially photography or like filmmaking, is the relationships you make, and that
mm,
personal side doesn't really always translate when you're talking f-stops and shutter speeds and all that kind of stuff. So I
yeah.
really do like the platform. I've checked out yours and other people's, and it's really really cool. So
Well,
anyone out there,
yeah.
check it out.
Yeah, get on any question. I love it because, like, it just seems like there's an endless list of questions that can come in, and I think sometimes I'll answer a question, I'll give a certain type of experience to it, and then a similar question will come in, and I'll remember something completely different based on an experience, and I'll relate it to that. So it gives me a chance to kind of explore all of my experiences. I don't think it's just one piece of knowledge to say this is the answer, right? There's always like many different layers to things sometimes. I'm sure in photography, when they're asking a very specific question, there might be just one direct answer, but I like that exploration of it. And I think that's what you're doing in photography is you're exploring and you're growing. I mean, I know you as kind of a surfing photographer because of the work that you've done in the water and the ocean, but you're way beyond that, aren't you?
Yeah, so I was strictly surf when I first came in, and I cannot thank the surf industry enough, and Chris Drumming and um, uh, Heath Walker for
Hmm.
giving me the opportunities they did. But somewhere around 2013, 2014, I kind of just peaked in that field, and I was a cinematographer, filmmaker when I first
Hmm.
started, and photography kind of just was an extension of that, so I could have a hobby and not just kind of sharpen my skills because I was getting burnt out. But yeah, around 2014, I met this photographer, Lucas Gilman, and he kind of took me under his wing in the outdoor world. And at that point in my life, I was kind of transitioning from the ocean to having a lot more hobbies, if you will, outside of it. And that's kind of how like it took off. And um, yeah, it's been a crazy, like I think almost 15 years now that I've been doing this. And yeah, I can't think of any other way I'd rather live my life.
Yeah, it does seem like a very freeing way. How do you capture landscape? Like when I'm outside, I don't know what to shoot. I don't know what to look at. I'll just take a photo and hope that it turns out okay. But like in terms of photography, when you've got such a big landscape like that, what are you aiming at? What are you looking for?
Um, so that's where the personal side of things comes along, and hopefully people enjoy your taste. A lot of the places I shoot, or landscape wise, or anything in general, has really just been my friends going out and doing stuff and looking at it from a photographer's perspective. You kind of just train your brain to find like I have no idea what it's like swimming in a pool, but I'm sure at a competitive level.
Hmm.
But I'm sure there's a recipe. Like if you were to coach someone, you'd be like,
Hmm.
okay, cup your hands and move your arms this way, and you want to have this flow. And so
Hmm.
it's kind of just the same thing with photography over the time. Like if you're like, okay, for this slow shutter speed works really well. For this, I want a high shutter speed. Um,
Hmm.
or you want to try something different, or this time of day, like this place looks great. I think I've shared it on the app too. A lot of times, like I'll just go out for a hike or for a climb or for a jaunt in the mountains or, whatever. And I'll just be up there and, it takes all day normally when I commit to something like that. And normally it's to clear my head. And so I'll just have mental notes as I go along, like, oh, this looked really cool. I wonder what the, sun would do at this time. And a lot of it's, trial and error
Yeah.
and just getting it done. At least for me, there's some people who have apps that I know that are friends of mine and they're just like full tech whizzes. But I've learned over time a lot of like the theoretical, you can talk to someone and they'll tell you every camera spec there is and, how the sensor is and everything. Like, this is why this camera brand's better than, this one. And I've been on beta shoots for cameras. When they come out, they have to do this like little testimonial, like the commercials you used to see. And a lot of the times, like, those cameras don't work the way they're supposed to. And so you kind of just learn that, there's no better way than just being out in the field and kind of, going through the ebbs and flows of everything. And I think it's really necessary in order to really, hone in your craft.
Yeah. Well, you cut your teeth in the surfing world. That's where you learned your craft. I mean, you grew up in California. How'd you end up in Hawaii?
So my parents, when I was growing up, they never had, nice cars or houses or whatever. It was kind of just like whatever to get us to and from, work in the beach and stuff. And they always talked about retiring in Hawaii. And they took us there, my brother and I, twice a year, like once to Oahu, once to Maui. And so we spent our summers in Maui and we spent like, Christmas time around Oahu. And I really enjoyed bodyboarding. And to me, just pipeline was everything. And so I convinced my parents I wanted to be a marine biologist. They're like, you have to go to college somewhere. So I'm like, I really wanted to go to physics to San Diego State. And I didn't get in there. So my backup plan was to go to, Hawaii to become this marine biologist / dolphin trainer. And really it was just to, go bodyboard type. But I mean, that was like, the long version. The short version is I ended up spending like 6 months out of my year on Oahu anyway, when I was like deep in the surf industry. And so, it just eventually became home. It was just kind of like, it felt like home at that time. And so I eventually just made the move.
Did you always carry a camera with you when you're in the ocean at that point? Or how did it start to kind of transfer into taking photographs of surfers?
So I was kind of just playing around. I had a class in high school and that was kind of like the gateway drug, if you will, that and watching surf movies and kind of figuring out how the whole entire thing works. And then, it just kind of happened, like when I made the move, finally I was like, always carrying a camera with me. It was just like one of those things where one day something happened. I don't want to go like too much into it because I probably share this story way too much, but I was on a trajectory to one career path and something happened along my career path. And, it was that moment that I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to tell my parents I'm going to be a surf filmmaker. And, they thought I was crazy.
Most parents do think you're crazy when you've got a passion for something that doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. It's not the usual route, like, hey, mom and dad, I'm going to spend the rest of my life in the ocean with a camera. And they're like, what?
Yeah. I mean, I think the generation, maybe like, your parents' generation, definitely mine, were like definitely like the 9 to 5. This is like the career path. Like, you have to do this. You have to be married by this time. You have to like have kids. Like, you're going to have healthcare. You're going to have health insurance, whatever. Like I don't think at that point it was like the dreamer, we're going to have this rich and famous lifestyle. Like, it kind of seems everyone's in right now.
Yeah. Now, were you aligning yourself with any particular surfer at that point? Like, I guess I would imagine as a surf photographer, you want to kind of attach yourself to a couple of different surfers who may be able to kind of elevate your photos in any way. Were you aligning that way?
That's a funny thing because I feel like that's like what everyone does now. The surf industry has made it so and this is not like a shot at anyone in particular, but it's, it, I feel like everything's at the point where it is now because surf companies were sneaking money into surfers' contracts
Mm.
so that they didn't have to pay for actual, like, footage and license it from everyone, or like have an in-house filmer
Mm.
and send them everywhere, because to them it's way too more expensive. Like, it's better to just front load a contract for a surfer, and in that be like, hey, here's your budget for your filmer. But that's like current state,
Mm.
and that's like, I guess, why everyone kind of wonders that. But no, when I was doing it, I was full, like, I had a group of friends, and I kind of put Santa Cruz, like, in that time period back on the map, like, because there was me and one other filmer there. Like, we were documenting every swell. Like, we were just had a, like, for him maybe they were surfers and like kind of friends, but for me, like, we hung out all the time. Like, we traveled together, did all this stuff. And then when I was like progressing my career, like past that point, that was kind of like the stepping stone. Like, you meet the team managers, you get in contact with them, like, oh, we want to license this, that. Um, when I was really growing my career, there was no one I was really like attached to. I always thought brands were bigger. Like, I never wanted the surfers' money, I wanted the brand's money. And
Mm.
so I was kind of just doing my own thing. Um, and yeah, that was like how I really took off. Like, I just kind of kept doing my own thing, and I was always friends with surfers, but there was not one like surfer I had to be like, oh, I have to work with this guy, or like this guy's gonna, like, take my career to that next level. It was kind of
So
just
what
like,
were you doing then? Were you out in the ocean taking photos? You'd come back, you'd feel like you had some good shots, and then you were taking them to magazines. Is that what you were doing?
so like back in that time, I'm not, yeah, it's really weird to talk about this because it seems like it was forever ago, but it wasn't. Um, Back in that time, you could just, you could shoot and you could talk to an editor and you'd be like, hey, like, I made my name through Surfline essentially.
Right.
And that was when they were first coming up. And, you're having this transition period from, print to digital.
Mm.
And so every time there was a swell in Santa Cruz, I kind of knew like they were doing swell features, and like they did a lot of swell stories, which is completely 180 from what their model is now. And they
Mm.
spent a lot of like money through like, um, grassroots editorial, I guess,
Mm.
to attract users and viewers. And so I would basically go shoot, for 4 days straight as like I'd like first email like the editor, and I'd be like, hey, there's a great swell coming. This looks pretty good. The winds look great. Some pros are in town. We kind of like I've been contact with them, like, we think we're about X, Y, and Z are gonna be really good. What do you think? And they either give me the green light, like, hey, we're on schedule for, this amount of money for X return in assets. And
Mm.
so did that, and I kind of just became known for quick turnaround at that
Mm.
time, and being able to swim, because there was DV tapes and all other sorts of things going on back then. It wasn't just like, hey, you have a memory card and you can just plug it into a camera, shoot, and you know and have instant gratification, or even an
Right.
iPhone or a GoPro. Really, at that time, I don't even think GoPros were a thing. Yeah, GoPros definitely weren't a thing. So like
Mm.
you had like I was a very niche, um, I guess, person, because I could swim and digitize everything, and didn't have a $100,000 camera, but made it look good. And so through Surfline, my name got out there, and then Chris Drumming, he's Walker, saw me, and then that's kind of like how it snowballed from there.
I mean, you say $100,000. Are they really $100,000 cameras? Is that how much they cost? Some of these?
I mean, back in the day, it seemed like the HVX was 20 grand.
Damn.
Yeah, pretty much like the entry level to anything in cinema world, like back then, like seemed just so unattainable because it was so much harder, I feel like, to make money.
Mm. Right.
So maybe it wasn't 20 grand, but like the HVX was like the equivalent of the Red right now. Like that was the camera you wanted to have. Like the Panasonic HVX shot slow-mo. I remember like it was the first time I saw like 60 frames like slowed down like all smoothly. And I was like, oh my God, that camera is so sick. I need that for like the water. And I looked at the price tag. I'm like, oh my God, I'm never gonna afford that. I'm like, living pretty much out of my car at that point with like what I had.
Has that all come down now? Is that all like really affordable in terms of the variety of quality?
Yeah, so everyone thinks like, you have to have a red, like, so to transition to the whole entire surf industry straight of working inside and insider
Yeah.
information, like, it was okay to have like a Canon 7D, which is like a $2,000 camera, like, or $1,500 camera back at the time. Like that was the cool thing. And then Reds came out, and for whatever reason, like every company was so high on them. They're great cameras. I own one. Um, but everyone's like, you have to have it in order to get these jobs. And, they didn't want to pay you what you were worth, or like, rent the camera, because if they rent it out to them per day, it's like way out of their budget. But yeah, so everyone has a stigma. You have to have a red, you have to have RE, you have to have these like, $50,000 production cameras. But cameras are so good these days. There's like, I like cringe almost every time now that I like look at the price tag for what I spent on a red, because you can get crazy good cameras for like $5,000,
Yeah.
$2,000, $10,000 if you really want to like splurge in that end. Like even like the new highest end red, I think is like half the price what my high end red is, which is wild to think about.
What's a red?
A red is just a company that makes, I would say personally, the best action sports cameras, like
Hmm.
best cameras that are high end, that are accepted for um, TV cinema. It's like a digital
Hmm.
cinema. It's like what I guess excuse me, cinema would have been back in the day. But
And you can flip between kind of video and camera mode fairly quickly.
no, so I mean, I guess you can, but yeah, if I'm like every job, like that's what really just is crazy to think about, like how people think these days. Like everyone's like, oh, you have to have both, and I really
Right.
think like for a while, like, so after Red, it was like everyone's like, oh, you can pull still images off this camera, like you can shoot motion and get stills, so we can just cut down the workload. Like we don't have to pay for a photographer and a filmmaker, because we'll just have the film guy, do both and pull the stills. But what they don't tell you is like, if you're shooting for motion, for a commercial, for TV, like there's certain rules, like the 180 shutter rule, for example.
Mm.
So when you like take your hand in front of your face, right? And sorry, my
Yeah.
hands are kind of messed up. I just came from a climbing trip.
Mm.
And you wave it in front of your face, you see ghosting. Like you'll see
Right.
ghosting if you like look at your hand, and it's just that motion blur, I guess is what you call it.
Yeah.
But in order to take like an action still image, you have to crank up the shutter so high to freeze the action. Now, if you
Mm.
do that with motion, you get this weird digitized, techie, really ugly look. So, um, yeah, I guess that's like the short, like where the industry
Yeah.
is right now. Like everyone's trying to like cross over and take stills from that, but it just doesn't work.
Right.
And
Right.
so, to answer your question, yes, I think there is a setting where you can just switch in between stills and video, but normally, like um, these larger productions I work on, which justifies owning this camera, you're just there to shoot motion. Like no one's
Yeah.
asking you to do both. Like they have a separate person to shoot that.
Oh,
I do
okay.
have a still camera that I can flip in between both, but that's like more for like personal, like home movie
Right.
or like whatever type stuff.
We individualize training in the pool, so why not individualize your nutrition? Erica Beine of Beine Wellness Building will help you and your swimmers get exactly what each athlete needs through genetic testing and personalized nutrition plans. So stop guessing what you should and shouldn't be putting into your body. Athletes within a few weeks have noticed they're recovering faster because they're fueling their body with what they need and staying away from what their body hates. Erica understands swimming. She gets it. She's worked with over 20 Olympians, including the fastest man in the world, Caleb Dressel. Group discounts are available, so go to Beine Wellness Building and get in touch with Erica today. That's Beine, Beine, wellnessbuilding.net. Swim Angelfish. Swim Angelfish is an online certification program that strengthens your teaching curriculum to serve swimmers of all abilities. Swim Angelfish will prepare you and your instructors with the skills to teach swimmers with autism, physical disabilities, anxiety, sensory and motor conditions, and more. Learn to teach skills faster and with more comfort with Swim Angelfish. Apply for an Only Alpha Pool Product Scholarship and receive up to 50% off your certification.
Go to swimangelfish.com today to apply.
Right. Well, we are, well, I'm generally known as a swimming podcast. So you're out in the ocean, you're out in Pipeline. How much of a good swimmer do you have to be? And do you do any swimming training?
Yeah, it's funny I asked you this question, like, like what is it? I think I asked you this already, but I'm like, how much does, ocean swimming translate to the pool? I don't know. That's a good question. I've never like, I'm obviously getting older now. And so I should do more training in that sense. But generally I've just like let my body adapts pretty quickly, even with all the injuries I've had. And so I've generally just like let myself go out on the first like big swell and get my butt kicked. And normally like my body will just adapt like, okay, it's winter time, like, ready to go. So in that sense, I'm probably the atypical person. Like I know there's guys who train like crazy. Like if you look at Nathan Florence and all those guys, they're constantly training to elevate their level. And that's just kind of like the part of their career. As far as like a good swimmer in the pool, I really don't know. I've never tested myself in that sense. I think it's a lot of it for me is in anything I do, it's like, how do I feel? How confident am I in myself? And it's like a lot of confidence and feel. So if I'm feeling it, like as soon as I know in my head I can do it, there's no doubt in my mind I can do it, and there's nothing that's going to stop me. And then on the contrary, which I guess is kind of crazy to live up or like leave up to chance or gamble with, I guess, like if I don't feel like I can do it, I'll like be the first to back off and like come up with some other plan.
Yeah.
But yeah, the bread and butter of my career has been in the ocean, in the water swimming. I would say for pipe, like you have to be a really good sprinter. Like you have to like just to get out there, because on the big days, like the big challenge for like most people is like timing it. So where you take off from the beach to like the channel, that depending on what the swell direction is doing, like if it's big and west, your channel's massive because the wave dies out, and then the current will just rip you down to Rocky Point, which is like 10 football fields lengths away. And you have this like big window to get through, kind of, whereas as if it's more north, you like that whole entire window to like punch through the impact zone becomes like maybe like a house wide, if that.
Wow.
And so you have to like really like get through there, otherwise like the next wave over gums will pound you. And I've had a couple like pretty good beat downs on bigger days when I swim out there, and just got pinned to the bottom on like a sand reef type thing, just by like not timing it right and half-assed duck diving. And then the worst thing is, the best worst thing is like you do the walk of shame, we call it, and that's if you don't make it out at all, you have to swim back in and then walk back to the takeoff point and do it again. And fortunately, I haven't had to do that yet.
Yeah, that's embarrassing. What about this in terms of the surfers? Like you've obviously got this zone where you're trying to get the best shot, you're trying to get as close as you can, but you're trying to give them the respect they deserve and give them the space to do what they need to. How do you find that balance between that?
At Pipe or just in?
Yeah, I mean at Pipe, that's probably the place where.
Yeah. So normally there's in the past, it's gone crazy now. In the past, when I was first starting, there was a pecking order, and there still kind of is, So as photographers, it's your job to get the shot, but also not interfere with the surfer and cause more like, plus you don't really want to be there anyway. Like no one wants their like head gashed in with a surfboard fin or nose of a board. So, we'll just assume like we're 5-8 years back. So there's a pecking order. And so when I was first coming up, it was like Scott Eichner, Brian Billman, like the people ahead of you who've put more time in there, Pat Stacy, like all these legendary photographers, like they would be in front of you, and then you kind of be in the back. You have like less priority. So now it'd be like, Brent Billman, Zach Noyle, whoever. And you kind of just find your place within that pecking order. And you just make a row. Or like, when Zach and I would be working out there together, and like we'd have like he was working for Rook and I was working for Reef, like we just had this unspoken deal, like, hey, if your guy's going, if I'm in front of you, I'll duck to make sure I'm out of your shot, and like vice versa. And you kind of just coordinate that with like whoever is out there really.
Right.
And then, nowadays there's like 1,000 guys who are shooting for social media, and nothing against that whatsoever, but they're in the channel all with the same lens, getting the exact same shot, clogging up that with the surfers, and the surfers, like, it's gotten to this point where it's kind of like just getting too much.
Yeah.
It's like a free for all out there. And that's when it gets dangerous, because there's no way, like on the bigger days, like anyone can kick out, or anyone can like really get out of the way.
Right.
And then even same with the surfers, like there's a lot of times now where there's guys who should not be out there, and they just sit on the shoulder. And I get it. I was, probably there at one point in my life too, but I wasn't taking off on waves on the shoulder. I was like trying to go to the peak, and they're taking off on the shoulder, and you have to now like watch out for them as well.
Yeah. And what about this this time I read online where you had a pretty severe accident? Were you on a jet ski at the time?
Yeah, so I'm guessing we're talking about the incident last year.
Last year, yeah.
Yeah, it's been a year. Wow. Yeah, I was on a jet ski at a place that I normally wouldn't be at. Like, I wouldn't stay on Oahu to shoot a big swell, generally speaking. I normally go to Jaws, but sorry. I talked to Mark Healy that night before, and he kind of convinced me that, this wave over here was going to be really special. And I said I'd stay because I looked at the wooden maps, and it looked really bad on Maui. And yeah, through a long course of events, I ended up on a particular jet ski, and I was on the ski that day when I broke my back.
Wow. And were you on the jet ski alone, or was someone riding and driving?
Yeah, my good friend, like relatively speaking within the surf world, Cam Richards, was driving that day, and
just misjudged it and just got hit by a wave.
It was just like the perfect storm. Like, we kind of talked before about what to do if we're like too far inside and the set's coming, and I just rolled up my camera bag and put all my like gear in there to like just strap it onto my back so I could have my hands free to hold on to stuff. And I said go. And as far as like big wave experience between the two of us, like being on skis and being on days like that, I had way more.
Yeah.
Like being in that situation. I meant to say go in, like turn around and go in, because that was the safest place. Like, the channel closes out, and so
Right.
you're better off trying to outrun the wave, and the thing can,
Right.
as long as everything goes right. And you go in and then come back out because it's all deep water and the wave will die out eventually. And yeah, the in part just didn't come out of my mouth, and yeah, it was one of those things where if you have a lot of experience driving in big waves, like, you kind of know to cut the engine before you go over the lip, so you don't motocross ramp off of it. And yeah, I don't, it was just a perfect storm of just bad events that happen.
And then you had to get airlifted, didn't you?
So that wave came, I felt the thing tingling, couldn't move my legs, and then there was a wave behind it. And so I think I've said this to a few people and whatnot, like, not many people know this part of the story, where like there was another 40-foot wave coming, and I had to swim through it. Like, I just was so, like, it was like the most life and death, like fight or flight, natural instinct I've ever like had to experience in my life. I thought like I was dead for sure. I couldn't move my legs. I'm like, if I get sucked over, like, this thing breaks on top of me, I'm dead. I'm gonna drown. Like, there's no way I'm gonna, like, this life vest that's outdated is gonna float me back to the surface. And my heart was racing, and so I just used my arms to swim as fast as I could. And I thought I actually covered more ground, but watching the drone video, it was like merely like, it was like probably like 20 feet, 30 feet that I had to like cover in order to make it through. But basically, like, punched through barely, and I felt the wave sucking me back, and luckily it let me go, and I was just relieved, and I waved my arms, and this surf photographer, Daniel Russo, came on a jet ski, picked me up, and then Brian Phillips, the lifeguard, who was kind of just out there out of the goodness of his heart, was running rescue and took me in all the way. And then they, as I was getting dragged up to the beach and stretchered into the ambulance to Oahu. My wife with her parents and her brother-in-law and her sister, who I was just meeting for the first time, actually saw me get
Wow.
in, like put into the ambulance, but they weren't quite sure. Like they were like pretty sure, but they're like, no, that can't be Ryan. Like he said he's fine. Like whatever. We haven't heard from him. Like, it's all good. And then I called them eventually, like hours later. And like, oh, we saw you. Like we thought it was you. Like we knew it was you. But yeah, no,
Wow.
I didn't get airlifted. I mean, maybe it would have been better. Maybe it would have been worse. That car ride to Oahu was pretty brutal. Felt like daggers were in my back.
Damn. That's crazy. I guess that's the risks you take to get the shot sometimes. But man, seems like a heavy price to pay. But
Yeah,
wow.
it definitely was.
Wow. Well, that's cool, man. Well, what do you have coming up? Anything on the horizon for you?
Yeah, I just funny how this whole entire thing works. Like it's so crazy being a photographer or a filmmaker. Like, you're like, damn, am I even relevant? Like, am I still good at my job? And then the next thing you know, like you're just like getting completely slammed with work. So I have a couple projects actually now that are coming up this current week. I've gotten extremely busy with work. And then I also have next week, I'm going back to California to spend Thanksgiving with my wife's family in Yosemite, place I love going. So it wasn't really hard to convince me to go there. But yeah, this like upcoming week, I have kind of two like, projects that I'm working on that I have to actually get up and start storyboarding after I get off this call. But yeah, so I have like two things coming up that wise, and I'm sure there will be more that pops up before the end of the year. But it's both, revolves around surf. So, and there's swell in the way, so it kind of worked out perfectly.
Well, cool, man. Well, listen, I appreciate you getting up at 3:30 in the morning to talk to us from Hawaii and get some work done. But nice to share your story too, man. And you're doing brilliant work. I love it. Anyone that wants to follow you, they can find you where? On Instagram? What's your Instagram?
It's Ryan period MOSS. So Ryan.Moss.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, some pretty cool stuff there. And do you have a web page as well?
Yeah, it's a little bit harder, but Ryan, the letter C, as in Christopher, my middle name, Moss. So RyanCMoss.com.
Okay, and we'll put this in the show notes as well, so people can find you there as well. But appreciate you doing this, man. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks, Brett. Thanks for
All
having
right,
me.
take care. Bye.
Bye.
Okay, introducing our newest sponsor, SwimTracks. SwimTracks is the smartest swim-specific tracker ever. It registers a ton of swim data that is translated into valuable real-time insights. It tracks the 3 most important data points for coaches and swimmers: time, heart rate, and stroke rate. You and your swimmers can now, from just one device, make sure you're training in the correct energy zones with the correct number of strokes. Visit swimtracks.com and schedule your free demo today. That's SwimTracks, TRAXX.com, swimtracks.com.